This is our 20 days.
Welcome back to our 20 days. In our last episode, you might remember that Jennifer had been through a day of testing on Friday, a rigorous day of testing. She was just wiped out, and we had awakened Saturday morning to some strange emails and a very important phone call from Dr. Graybill. So we pick up our discussion at that point. So, somewhat being in a state of shock with this, Dr. Graybill had explained, so we've canceled the surgery on Wednesday. I'm having you see Dr.
Of all names, Dr. Payne.
Dr. Payne, who was the head of the GI department at MUSC.
Which again was
right person, right time.
Exactly. And we'll tell you, looking back, why I think it should have been him. Anyway, so he was a very good doctor.
So there were two people that specifically we remember. So we get up, we go to the MUSC to do the endoscopy and the colonoscopy. And what was the young lady's name that you remember?
Well, let me take you back a little bit. The anesthesiologist was a very young gal with the most beautiful curly hair, and she could see that tears were coming down my face. She was the most compassionate person and said, listen, I know what happens, I do this every day. I get it. You don't do this every day. We get it. So it's okay. We're going to take really good care of you. So that was a very comforting thing to say. The other thing is I saw a Susan. I remember her like it was yesterday. She was tall, had blonde hair. She leaned into me next.
She was a nurse, correct?
She was a nurse. Yeah. And she said, I'm going to be in the surgery room and I am going to pray for you. And at that moment, it just, I probably lost it at that point. I handed over my dear Sacred Heart medal to Dave, and they rolled me away.
And then Dr. Payne came out and was talking. It was just before they rolled you back. He came out because it was both of us. I do remember he was talking to both of us. And I got this sense that, and this was just kind of the normal surgeon type of, briefing before the surgery. It wasn't anything, really stood out, except it felt to me like he was really trying to tamp down our expectations that we were or were not going to find something here. And I remember very specifically one thing he said was, these types of tumors, and he used that word specifically, often don't lend themselves to sampling, meaning they're hard. They're tough to scrape things off of. They're hard to get a piece to go analyze separately to find out if it's benign or malignant. And I very much had that feeling. And then he walked away for just a moment, and I've always assumed that he went back to look at the CAT scan and then came back out and he says, okay, I've kind of looked over, the film, and, I think, we won't be in here very long. And then they wheeled you back. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know, you were back there in total something less than an hour. Wasn't that long, which I thought, I don't know what I had in my head, but I've had longer than an hour in my head. Mm-hmm. Just thinking it's two separate procedures. Two pieces of equipment. I assume they're two different pieces of equipment.
I hope so. Yeah. One going down your throat,
one going if that's out. The case, let's do this one first.
Yeah, exactly.
But then once, when in anesthesia and all that, so once all that was done, your Susan came back out. And I asked her, said, so how did it go? And her answer was something along the lines of, I'll let the doctor tell you, but she's good. And I remember her saying she's good. And I didn't know how to interpret that. Mm-hmm. Was it, okay, she came through the procedure okay?
Right.
The anesthesia, everything else? Is it, we looked around and it's great. There's nothing here, or was it just her keeping me, happy until I talked to the doctor? So I kind of sat there for a while, and then Dr. Payne came out, and I asked him again. I remember very specific because I can be pretty verbose like in these, or I can be pretty quick in words. I said, "So, how is she?" And he looked at me and he said, "Pink and perfect."
And
And
when Dave said that to me, I just about lost it. Like I'm losing it now.
and I said, "Okay, you're going to have to tell me what that means." And he said, "There's no tumor there." And he said, "We came at it from this way, we came at it from that way, we end up in the stomach in both cases, and there's nothing in there." And he brought out the pictures from, I assume, was the endoscope, which were more clear and obvious. You could kind of tell you were, what's this called, the duodenum, I think, is where the stomach and the esophagus meet. So if I'm wrong, somebody look it up and tell me. But it literally was what he said. It's pink. It's perfect. There was no mass in there. And I said, "Okay, I'm no expert. You've been doing this forever. I've looked at 2 CAT scans in my life, both in the last 2 days. Explain to me what you see in this CAT scan." He says, "I can't. Has she eaten anything?" I said, "She hasn't eaten in 3 days." "Has she taken any medication?" "No, nothing." He said, "Well, sometimes, a pill gets lodged in such an angle and the camera's at a certain angle and blah, blah, blah.
This couldn't explain a tennis ball.
Yeah, which wouldn't explain this. And I just remember very specifically, I said, "What do you think about divine intervention?" And he looked at me and kind of shrugged his shoulders and gave kind of an agnostic answer, which I would expect from a physician. And he said, "I got nothing better." Which was as close as I would have expected to agree with me.
Him. He's a great doctor.
Pretty stoic.
But pretty stoic, yeah. And I guess what I remember about all this from going forward in the future, because I always wondered, why did I have to go through all of that? And a dear friend, Diane, told me much later, "Jennifer, sometimes other people need to see the divine intervention."
Right.
And whether it was that doctor or whether it was any of the nurses or any of the health professionals, maybe they had to see that there is hope.
Yeah, and I think there is validity to that. Is it's if you go back to a lot of biblical passages, during Christ's testimony, that lots of things he did for the benefit of everybody to see. I mean, there were lots of stages in Scripture where Christ doesn't want people to know that he had done this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
And there were other places where he did, and this we've always interpreted as, this was good news to be shared with others. And when a doctor tells you he's got no better explanation than divine intervention.
And he also said the words pink and perfect. Only God is perfect.
Right.
And when he said that, it just kind of hit me that, you know what, God made it pink and perfect in there for me.
So coming out of all of that, Dr. Payne told me also that I've already called Dr. Grable, let her know exactly what's going on. I talked to her personally. So they're going to do your surgery as scheduled on Wednesday. But they're probably going to open you up instead of.
So I couldn't do laparoscopic. And, again, as a woman going through all of this, knowing that you're not going to have any biological children, And then you hear, oh, what could have been a laparoscopic procedure now is going to be a total opening of your whole.
So there's probably two reactions there, right? I mean, there's the whole, it's a more serious surgery.
Right.
I'm going to go through a longer recovery.
Right.
It's going to be more painful, all of that. And plus, there's just a vanity thing about it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's instead of having, 4 little holes on your abdomen,
I'm going to have a
you're going to have a,
incision.
a slice across the front of you that's at, 6 inches or something like that.
Right.
So they scheduled the surgery for that coming Wednesday. And again, we've gotten into the habit of getting early morning phone calls.
Yes.
So you were scheduled, I want to say noon?
Yeah, it was something like that. And so, we both couldn't really sleep. Yeah. And we got up early, got ready. And my this is something I don't know if you recall, but my aunt is just a prayerful, faithful person. And she kept saying, you know what, I'm going to pray for a lot of things, obviously, Jennifer, that the procedure goes well and everything, but I'm going to pray that we get you in earlier. And she had said this after this all happened, but
yeah, it was. So they did call us, as it turns out. I don't. It wasn't like crack of dawn early, but it was like 8:30 or something like that. Can you come here? We've had a cancellation ahead of you. The surgical suite is open. The doctor is available. So we, grabbed everything we could. Made sure the dogs were bedded down, and we let the next door neighbor know so they could come over and check on the dogs sometime during the day, because we just didn't know how long a day this was going to be before I got home. And so we got in there, gosh, if they called at 8:30, we were probably outside the surgical suite by 9:15.
Yeah.
And it's about a half an hour drive.
Yeah.
To get from where we live in Mount Pleasant to downtown Charleston. So they prepped us in terms of telling me what was going to happen, telling you, and then they wheeled you back.
It was probably the best thing. Well, I know it was the best thing that could have happened, because bottom line is we didn't have any more time to, labor on this and dwell on it.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was like headed, and they were prepping. And yes, I said goodbye and kissed, my dear husband, but it was all happening so quick that there was no way to have the emotion that I probably would have had if it was later.
So, we went through all that, and they probably wheeled you back, where they sent me away from the prep room so they could wheel you back, around 10.
Mm-hmm.
And the OR nurse, the head scrub nurse, or whatever they call that position, came over to me as they were pushing you back and said, this is probably going to be a 4-hour procedure, something in that range. So as we get through about halfway, that phone right there will ring, and I will call you and let you know what the status is. So she went on in, and I kind of looked at my watch and realized I'm in this waiting room of maybe 50 people outside of the entire surgical suite there at MUSC. And my first reaction was, well, there is quite a collection of people. And what I mean by that is just a variety of people. You saw people that...
different ages,
people that obviously had incredible concern on their minds and, were weighed down with worry. And then others had 3 small children in the room that were just running around playing like it was just, at romper room, and, just another day. So I decided, okay, I've got at least an hour and a half before anybody calls me. So I'm going to go down and have something to eat, because I hadn't had any breakfast, and did that. And, that's always kind of a relaxing time for me. Is I've always enjoyed having some reading material. So in those days, it was probably a newspaper. Okay, so,
it wasn't that long ago.
Look it up, kids. We didn't get the news till the next day in the driveway. So, but it might have been an iPad or my iPhone. I'd have to go back and look at the dates. Probably an iPhone. So I was reading that and having some food, and that's always been kind of relaxing to me, and it helped. So I went back up, and it was probably, I don't know, pushing 12.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about signs. And So I'm sitting there in the room and I'm trying to sit someplace near this phone. So when it rings, I can get it before the first ring stops. Um, and there's a couple of televisions in the room, and it's on the channel showing The Price is Right, which, as it turns out, was one of your dad's favorites. But I hadn't watched this in a while. But if you remember how it goes, you have during the hour 6 different contestants, and then there's like a couple of other things, and they end up with what they call the showcase cinema. So it's at the end where it's the two of the contestants bidding on 2 different packages, and the one that comes closest without going over,
it could be
I could do that. I could have replaced Drew Carey.
Yeah, there
he
you go.
leaves. But anyway, so I'm sitting there kind of half watching it. It's one of those, I'm reading something, I'm watching other people, the TV's going, but it comes up, and the first showcase, what among other things, was a trip to Paris. We were engaged in Paris. My first thought was, okay, random event.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. Kind of curious. It did make me think a little bit, but I didn't pressure myself into making this something it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second showcase comes up, and it includes a trip to St. Lucia, which is where we honeymooned. So it's like, all right, God, I get it. Thanks for I took it as a thumbs up. I guess it could have been a thumbs down. But I took it as a thumbs up that things were going well. And then, I don't know, a few minutes later, that phone rang, and the OR nurse gave me the good news, which was things are going fine so far. Mm-hmm. And I asked a question I knew the answer was no. Is any results at this point? She says, no. I can just tell you at this point, the surgery is going fine as expected. We've probably got another 2 hours worth of work here. So that was that.
And I will tell you, I had no idea this surgery was going to be 4 hours. And maybe they told me that, but you're just going in and you're thinking, okay, just one thing at a time, one thing at a time, one thing. But I had absolutely no idea it was going to be that long.
Yeah, and obviously when you're under, you have no sense of time.
Well, no.
So I don't know, a couple hours later, so something around the 4-hour mark. I don't remember that it was drastically different than what they had said. Dr. Graybill comes out, and I have to admit, and sorry, Dr. Graybill, I have to just say it this way, you looked like you'd been put through the ringer. She was, had a good sweat going. Mm-hmm. She had taken off whatever cap that she had covering her hair. Her hair was matted down. Mm-hmm. Which I took to mean she had worked really hard during. At this point, Jennifer has come out of surgery, and Dr. Graybill is about to kind of give me the update on the process. And we'd like you to tune into the next episode. It'll be the final part of our story here for the 20 days, where we'll talk about the results of the surgery and her recovery period and all the emotional ups and downs we went through over the next several days after the surgery. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Hey all, thanks for watching this episode of Our 20 Days. Look for us at our20days.com, and please hit the subscribe button so you're notified of all future episodes as they drop, usually on Thursdays. Thanks for watching.